Republic P-47 Thunderbolt. The Republic P-47 Thunderbolt, nicknamed the Jug, is a World War II-era fighter aircraft produced by the American company Republic Aviation from 1941 through 1945. One of the main United States Army Air Forces USAAF fighters, it found success in the European and Pacific theaters as an escort fighter well suited to high-altitude air-to-air combat. It also served as the foremost American fighter bomber in the ground attack role. The P-47 was noted for its firepower. Its primary armament was 8 50-caliber machine guns, and it could carry 5-inch rockets or a bomb load of 2 500 lb 100 kg. When fully loaded, the aircraft weighed up to 8 tons, making it one of the heaviest fighters of the war. It was also noted for its ability to remain airworthy with battle damage. The P-47 was designed around the powerful Pratt & Whitney RTOT 800 double wasp 18-cylinder radial engine, which also powered the U.S. Navy, U.S. Marine Corps Grumman F-6F Hellcat and Vought F-4U Corsair. An advanced turbosupercharger ensured the aircraft's eventual dominance at high altitudes, while also influencing its size and design. The armored cockpit was relatively roomy and comfortable, and the sliding bubble canopy, introduced on the D variant, offered good visibility. The P-47 also served with the air forces of France, the United Kingdom, and the Soviet Union, and with allied Mexican and Brazilian squadrons. It is the namesake of a later U.S. ground attack aircraft, the Fairchild Republic A-10 Thunderbolt II. Development. The P-47 Thunderbolt was designed by Alexander Kartveli, a man of Georgian descent. It was to replace the Seversky P-35 developed earlier by a Russian immigrant named Alexander P. de Seversky. Note 2. He both had fled from their homeland, Tbilisi, Georgia, to a safe fork. Note 3. In 1939. Republic Aviation designed the AP-4 demonstrator powered by a Pratt & Whitney R-1830 radial engine with a belly-mounted turbocharger. A small number of Republic P-43 Lancers were built, but Republic had been working on an improved P-44 rocket with a more powerful engine, as well as on the AP-10 fighter design. The latter was a lightweight aircraft powered by the Allison V-1710 liquid-cooled V-12 engine and armed with 250 and 12.7mm Amdonmanosin 4, 30 and 7 and 6.62 mm mounted in the wings. The United States Army Air Corps, USAAF, backed the project and gave it the designation XP-47. In the spring of 1940, Republic and the USAAF concluded that the XP-44 and the XP-47 were inferior to Luftwaffe fighters. Republic tried to improve the design, proposing the XP-47A, but this failed. Kartveli then designed a much larger fighter, which was offered to the USAAC in June 1940, which ordered a prototype in September as the XP-47B. The XP-47A, which had little in common with the new design, was abandoned. The XP-47B was of all-metal construction, except for the fabric-covered tail control surfaces with elliptical wings, with a straight leading edge that was slightly swept back. The P-47's airfoil section was developed by A. Kartveli and was designated as Republic S-3.7. The air-conditioned cockpit was roomy, and the pilot's seat was comfortable, like a lounge chair. As one pilot later put it, the canopy door initially hinged upward. Main and auxiliary self-sealing fuel tanks were placed under the cockpit, giving a total fuel capacity of 305 US gallons, 254 imp gal, Fun 155 LAN. Power came from a Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp 2-row cylinder radial engine producing 2000 HP 1500 kW, the same engine that powered the prototype Vought XF-4U-1 fighter to just over 400 MIFIS 6-40 km in October 1940, with the double wasp on the XP-47B turning a 4-bladed Curtiss speed propulsor of 146 in 3.7 in diameter. The loss of the AP-4 prototype to an engine fire ended Kartveli's experiments with tight-fitting cowlings, so the engine was placed in a broad cowling that opened at the front in a horse collar-shaped ellipse. The cowling admitted cooling air for the engine, left and right oil coolers, and the turbo-supercharger intercooler system. The engine exhaust gases were routed into a pair of Westergate-equipped pipes that ran along each side of the cockpit to drive the turbo-supercharger turbine at the bottom of the fuselage, about halfway between cockpit and tail. At full power, the pipes glowed red at their forward ends and the turbine spun at 300 rpm. The complicated turbo-supercharger system with its ductwork gave the XP-47B a deep fuselage, and the wings had to be mounted in a relatively high position. This was difficult, since long-legged main landing gear struts were needed to provide ground clearance for the enormous propeller. To reduce the size and weight of the undercarriage struts, and so wing-mounted machine guns could be fitted, Each strut was fitted with a mechanism by which it telescoped out 9 in 23C mu while it extended. The XP-47B was very heavy compared with contemporary single-engine fighters, with an empty weight of 900 lb-4 500 kg or 65% more than the YP-43. Kartveli said, "It will be a dinosaur, but it will be a dinosaur with good proportions." And the armament was 8 50 calibers 12 pulse 100 mm light barrel, Browning ANGM-2 machine guns, 4 in each wing. The guns were staggered to allow feeding from side-by-side ammunition boxes, each with 350 rounds. All 8 guns gave the fighter a combined rate of fire around 100 rounds per second, or 10. The XP-47B first flew on the 6th of May 1941 with Lowry P. Brabham at the controls. Although minor problems arose, such as some cockpit smoke that turned out to be due to an oil drip, the aircraft proved impressive in its early trials. It was lost in an accident on that 8th of August 1942, but before that mishap, the prototype had achieved a level speed of 41 twi of 6663 km at 25 800 507 900 mi in altitude and a demonstrator clival to 15 Ellerhosen Fefter 4 600 minutes. Though the XP-447B had its share of shakedown troubles, the newly reorganized United States Army Air Forces placed an order for 171 production aircraft, the first being delivered in December 1941. Operational history. U.S. service by the end of 1942, P-47Cs were sent to England for combat operations. The initial Thunderbolt Flyers 56 Fighter Group were sent overseas to join the 8th Air Force. As the P-47 worked up to operational status, it gained a nickname, Jeg, because its profile was similar to that of a common milk jug of the time. Note 4 fighter groups already stationed in England began introducing the jugs in January 1943, the Spitfire Flying 4th Fighter Group, a unit built around a core of experienced American pilots who had flown in the RAF Eagle squadrons prior to the U.S. entry in the war, and the 78th Fighter Group, formerly flying P-38 Lightning. Beginning in January 1943, Thunderbolt fighters were sent to the Joint Army-Air Forces civilian Millville Airport in Millville, New Jersey, to train civilian and military pilots. The first P-47 combat mission took place 10 March 1943 when the 4th FG took their aircraft on a fighter sweep over France. The mission was a failure due to radio malfunctions. All P-47s were refitted with British radios and missions resumed 8 April. The first P-47 air combat took place 15 April with Major Don Blakesley of the 4th FG scoring the Thunderbolt's first air victory against a Focke-Wulf 019 owner. By mid-1943, the Jug was also in service with the 12th Air Force in Italy 14E and against the Japanese in the Pacific, with the 348th Fighter Group flying missions out of Port Moresby, New Guinea. By 1944, the Thunderbolt was in combat with the USAAF in all its operational theaters except Alaska. Luftwaffe ace Heinz Bahr said that the P-47 could absorb an astounding amount of lead tray from shooting at it and had to be handled very carefully. Although the North American P-51 Mustang replaced the P-47 in the long-range escort role in Europe, the Thunderbolt still ended the war with an aerial kill ratio of 4.61 in over 746,000 sorties of all types, at the cost of 3,499 P-47s to all cause about ton 7 by the end of the war. The 56th FG was the only 8th Air Force unit still flying the P-47 by preference. The unit claimed 67712 air victories and 311 ground kills, at the cost of 128 aircraft. ED Need Lieutenant Colonel Francis S. Gabreski scored 28 victories, 90 Captain Robert S. Johnson scored 27 aerial victories with 1 unconfirmed probable kill, leading to some giving. His 28 of 20 and 56th FG commanding officer Colonel Hubert Zenk scored 17.75 kills. Note 5. Despite being the sole remaining P-47 group in the 8th Air Force, the 56th FG remained its top scoring group in aerial victories throughout the war. With increases in fuel capacity as the type was refined, the range of escort missions over Europe steadily increased until the P-47 was able to accompany bombers in raids all the way into Germany. On the way back from the raids, pilots shot up ground targets of opportunity and also used belly shackles to carry bombs on short-range missions, which led to the realization that the P-47 could perform a dual function on escort missions as a fighter bomber. Even with its complicated turbo-supercharger system, its sturdy airframe and tough radial engine could absorb significant damage and still return home. The P-47 gradually became the USAF's primary fighter bomber by late 1943. Early versions of the P-47D carried 500 Lt 30 kg bombs underneath their bellies. Mid-production versions of the P-47D could carry 1,000 lb 450 comms and make 4.5 into 115 Money rockets under their wings, or from the last version of the P-47D in 1944, 5 into 130 Mung high-velocity aircraft rockets, Voshvars, also known as Holy Moses, From D-Day until VE Day, Thunderbolt pilots claim to have destroyed 86,000 railroad cars, 9,000 locomotives, 6,000 armored fighting vehicles, and 68,000 trucks, 22 he during Operation Cobra in the vicinity of Ronsi on the 29th of July, early in the US breakout. The 405th Fighter Group hit a German column trapped between Ronsi and Seat Dienis Vetu by elements of the US 2nd and 3rd Armored Divisions. The group attacked this column from 3:10 p.m. up to 9:40 p.m. Ground investigations found 66 tanks, 204 vehicles, and 11 guns destroyed in this attack. Medal of Honor recipients: 2 P-47 pilots received the Medal of Honor during World War USAF Cole. Neil E. Kirby of the 348th Fighter Group was awarded the Medal of Honor for his action during a fighter sweep over the Japanese base at WWII, New Guinea on the 11th of October 1943. 47D serial number 4275908 nicknamed Fiari Gingerfit. Encountering 40 Japanese planes, Kirby led his flight of 4 P-47s, and in the ensuing combat, he shot down 6 Japanese planes. After the mission, Kirby would score a total of 22 aerial victors before he was shot down and killed over WWII in 5 March 1944 to for USAF 1st Lt. Raymond L. Knight of the 346th Fighter Squadron of the 350th Fighter Group was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor for his actions during missions over northern Po Valley. April 1945, line P-47D, serial number 4226785, nicknamed Oche, 25-8 on the 24th of April. He repeatedly volunteered to lead attacks on enemy air bases and exposed his P-47 to intense hostile fire in low-altitude reconnaissance and strafing missions. During a mission on the following day, his P-47 was badly damaged by anti-aircraft fire. Knowing that his unit was short on aircraft, he decided against parachuting to safety and instead attempted to fly his P-47 back to his home airbase, but crashed in the Apennine Mountains and was killed on 26E post-war service. With the end of World War II, orders for 59034 were cancelled. 927 redesignated as F-47 in 1947. The aircraft served AF through 1947, the USF Strategic Air Command from 1946 through 1947, the active duty United States Air Force USF until 1949, and with the Air National Guard until 1953, F-47 served as spotters for rescue aircraft such as the OA-10 Catalina and Boeing B-70H. In 1950, F-47 Thunderbolts were used to suppress the declaration of independence in Puerto Rico by nationalists during the Jayuya Uprising. The F-47 was not deployed to Korea for the Korean War. The USA Finance had more North American F-51 P-51 Mustangs and used them mainly in the close air support role. Since the Mustang was more vulnerable to being shot down, many were lost to anti-aircraft fire. Some suggested the more durable Thunderbolt should have been sent to Korea in the Mustang's place. 2TA the Cuban Air Force took delivery of 29X USAF airframes and spares when, by the late 1950s, the F-47 was considered long obsolete as a fighter but was well suited for counter-insurgency tasks. 20AP due to continued post-war service with U.S. military and foreign operators. Some Thunderbolts have survived, and a few are still flying. P-47 in Allied service. P-47s were operated by several Allied air arms during World War II. The RAF received 240 Razorback P-47Ds, which they designated Thunderbolt Mark I, and 5 and 90 Bubbletop P-47D-25s designated Thunderbolt Mark IIs. With no need for another high-altitude fighter, the RAF adapted their Thunderbolts for ground attack, a task for which the type was well suited. Once the Thunderbolts were cleared for use in 1944, they were used against the Japanese in Burma by 16 RAF squadrons of the Southeast Asia Command from India. Operations with Army support operating as cab ranks, to be called in when needed, attacks on enemy airfields and lines of communication, and escort sorties. They proved devastating in tandem with Spitfires during the Japanese breakout attempt at the Sitang Bend in the final months of the war. The Thunderbolt with 3 500 LB-30 Kg bombs, or in some cases British 660 LB-27 P-3 rocket projectiles. Long-range fuel tanks 29 Fe gave 5 hours of endurance. Thunderbolts flew escort for RAF liberators in the bombing of Rangoon. Thunderbolts remained in RAF service until October 1946. Post-war RAF Thunderbolts were used in support of the Dutch attempts to reassert control of Batavia. Those squadrons not disbanded outright after the war equipped with British-built aircraft such as the Hawker Tempest. 30 He during the Italian campaign, the Gruppo de Casa da Forza Aérea Brasileira, Brazilian Air Force 1st Fighter Squadron flew a total of 48 P-47Ds in combats of a total of 67 received, 19 of which were backup aircraft. This unit flew a total of 445 missions from November 1944 to May 1945 over northern Italy and Central Europe, with 15 P-47s lost to German flak and 5 pilots being killed in action, 31 in the early 1980s. This unit was awarded the Presidential Unit Citation by the American government in recognition for its achievements in World War II. WWII from March 1945 to the end of the war in the Pacific. As Mexico had declared war on the Axis on May 22, the Mexican Escuadron Rio de Pelea 201's 21st Fighter Squadron operated P-47Ds as part of the U.S. 5th Air Force in the Philippines. In 791 sorties against Japanese forces, the 21st lost no pilot craft to enemy action. 33 The Free French Air Forces received 446 P-47Ds from 1943. These aircraft saw extensive action in France and Germany, and again in the 1950s during the Algerian War of Independence. After World War II, the Italian Air Force received 75 P-470, 25 sent to 5 Stormo and 99 to the 51. These machines were delivered between 1947 and 1950. However, they were not well liked, as the Italian pilots were used to much lighter aircraft and found the controls too heavy. Nevertheless, the stability, payload, and high speed were appreciated. Most importantly, the P-47 served as an excellent transition platform to heavier jet fighters, including the F-84 Thunderjet. Starting in 1953-34, the type was provided to many Latin American air forces, some of which operated it into the 1960s. Small numbers of P-47s were also provided to China and Yugoslavia. In Soviet service in mid-1943, the Soviet High Command showed an interest in the P-47B. D-10 Rais were ferried to the Soviet Air Forces, VVS via Alaska, in March 1944. Two of them were tested in April-May 1944. Test pilot Alexei N. Grinchik noted the spacious cockpit with good ventilation and a good all-around view. He found it easy to fly and stable upon take-off and landing, but it showed excessive rolling stability and poor directional stability. Soviet engineers disassembled the third aircraft to examine its construction. They appreciated the high production standards and rational design well suited to mass production, and the high reliability of the hard-hitting Browning machine guns. With its high service ceiling, the P-47 was superior to fighters operating on the Eastern Front, yielding a higher speed above 30,000 feet as a 900 MOV. The Yakovlev Yok-9, Latvian Luftwaffe Messerschmitt Befo 9G, and Fokkov Warfalonde outperformed the early model P-47 at low and medium altitude, where the P-47 had poor acceleration and performed aerobatics rather reluctantly. In mid-1944, 22 REs and P-47D-27 Res-35 were ferried to the USSR via Iraq and Iran. Many were sent to training units, less than half reached operational units, and they were rarely used in combat. 36 FE, the fighters were assigned to high-altitude air defense over major cities in rear areas. Unlike their Western counterparts, the VVS made little use of the P-47 as a ground attack aircraft, depending instead on their own Ilyushin Il-2. At the end of the war, Soviet units held 188 P-46A in German service. The Luftwaffe operated at least one captured P-47 in poor weather on 7 November 1943, while flying a P-47D-2 RA on a bomber escort mission. General William E. Roach of 358th Fighter Squadron, 355th Fighter Group made an emergency landing on a German airfield. Roach was imprisoned at Stalag Luftwaffe. The Thunderbolt was given German markings, 37th in Chinese service after World War II. The Chinese Nationalist Air Force received 1 and 2 P-47Ds used during the Chinese Civil War. The Chinese Communists captured 5 P-47Ds from the Chinese Nationalist forces. The Chinese Nationalists employed 70 P-47Ds and 2 P-47Ns brought to Taiwan in 1952. P-47s were used extensively in aerial clashes over the Taiwan Strait between nationalist and communist aircraft. Bond 30A flying the Thunderbolt aerial warfare initial response to the P-47 praised its dive speed and high-altitude performance, while criticizing its turning performance and rate of climb, particularly at low to medium altitudes. The turbosupercharger in the P-47 gave the power plant its maximum power at 27 for 200 MUV, and in the thin air above 30,000 for 900 MUV. The Thunderbolt remained fast and nimble compared to other aircraft. 39 He, the P-47 first saw action with the 4th Fighter Group, whose pilots were mainly drawn from the 3 British Eagle squadrons, who had previously flown the British Spitfire Mark V, a much smaller and much more slender aircraft. At first, they viewed their new fighter with misgivings. It was huge. The British pilots joked that a Thunderbolt pilot could defend himself from a Luftwaffe fighter by running around and hiding in the fuselage. Optimized for high-altitude work, the Thunderbolt had 5 feet 1.5 of more wingspan, a quarter more wing area, about 4 times the fuselage volume, and nearly twice the weight of a Spitfire V.40-411 Thunderbolt pilot compared it to flying a bathtub around the sky. When his unit, a 4th Fighter Group, was equipped with Thunderbolts, Ace Don Blakesley said, referring to the P-47's vaunted ability to dive on its prey. It ought to be able to dive. It certainly can't climb by 4-2. Sir Blakesley's early model P-47C had not been fitted with the new paddle blade propellered. The 4th Fighter Group's commander hated the P-47, and his prejudices filtered down to the group's pilots. The 4th had the fewest kills of any of the first 3 P-47 squadrons in Europe before when US ace James A. Goodson, who had flown Spitfires with the RAF and flew a P-47 in 1943, at first shared the skepticism of other pilots for their 7-ton milk bottles. But Goodson learned to appreciate the P-47's potential. There were many US pilots who preferred the P-47 to anything else. They do not agree that the WWII-190 held an overall edge against it. The P-47's initial success in combat was primarily due to tactics. Using rolls, the P-47 had an excellent roll rate and energy, saving dive and zoom climbs from high altitude to outmaneuver German fighters. Both the Bf-109 and F-190 could, like the Spitfire, out-turn and out-climb the early model P-47s at low to medium altitudes. Since these early P-47s had mediocre climb performance due to the lack of paddle blade propellers, the 444, the rival of the new Curtiss paddle blade propeller in early 1944, significantly increased climb rate at lower altitudes and came as a surprise to German pilots, who had resorted to steep climbs to evade pursuit by the P-47-41. Some P-47 pilots claimed to have broken the sound barrier in steep dives, but later research revealed that, because of the pressure build-up inside the pitot tube at high speeds, airspeed readings became unpredictably exaggerated. As P-47s were able to out-dive enemy fighter planes, German pilots gradually learned to avoid diving away. Kurt B.U. Hliegen, a high-scoring German fighter ace with 112 victories, recalled the P-47 was very heavy, too heavy for some maneuvers. We would see it coming from behind and pull up fast. And the P-47 couldn't follow, and we came around and got on its tail in this way. By 4-5, other positive attributes included the P-47's ruggedness. Its radial piston engine had a high tolerance for damage compared to liquid-cooled engines, while its large size meant it could sustain a large amount of damage and still be able to get its pilot back to base. Note 64-6 with 8, 50 and 12.7 Muth machine guns. The P-47 carried more firepower than other single-engined American fighters. P-47 pilots claimed 20 Luftwaffe Messerschmitt Me-262 jet fighters and 4 Arido Tu-34 jet bombers in aerial combat. Ground attack role. The P-47 proved to be a formidable fighter, bomber due to its good armament, heavy bomb load, and ability to survive enemy fire. The P-47's survivability was due in part to its radial piston engine, which, unlike comparable liquid-cooled engines, had a high tolerance for damage. On 4-7, the Thunderbolt's 8, 50 and 12.7 mm machine guns were capable against lightly armored targets, although less so than cannon-armed aircraft of the day. In a ground attack role, the armor-piercing incendiary, and armor-piercing incendiary tracer ammunition proved useful in penetrating thin-skinned and lightly armored German vehicles and causing their fuel tanks to explode, as well as occasionally damaging some types of enemy armored fighting vehicles. AFV Citra and 4A8 P-47 pilots frequently carried 500 lbs 230 kg bombs. Using skip bombing techniques for difficult targets, skipping bombs into railroad tunnels to destroy hidden enemy trains was a favorite tactic. Tube 10 rocket, the Adolph explosive 4.5 in 100 rockets, each with an explosive force similar in 105 of an either under the artillery shadley. So, developing again, whereas the P-47 is ground and ground attack capability, a family one latent and one and all to four for the one age, short of I thought fourth in the war. The P-47 retrofitted with more powerful 5 in 130 Bunvow rockets. Variants main article Republic P-47 Thunderbolt variants surviving aircraft main article Republic P-47 Thunderbolts specifications P-47D-40 Thunderbolt general characteristics crew 1 length 36 to 101 in Earth Zoom 2 mils wingspan Try 4 to 3 and 5 height 14 to Ep1 16 and 4.472 me wing area 300 skew 50 28 mil 60 aki airfoil Seversky S-36 night empty weight 10 0 4 February 3060 gross weight. Season 6, 1 kg max takeoff weight 17,500 lb7 Janau power plant a 1 Pratt & Whitney R2859 18th cylinder air-cooled radial piston engine. Kababov propellers 4 bladed Curtiss electric C542S constant speed propeller 30 FIO in C-tronissimusman diameter performance maximum speed 426 mafs and A666 at 30,000 F as a 9-100 my right 1 660 km 900 me service ceiling 42,000 F lays 13,000 me wing loading. Armament ATOV 50 in 12.7 MUV M2 Browning machine guns with 425 rounds per gun, 3,400 rounds total, up to 2,500 Albremi of 100 of Bums 10 of 5 is 127 AR unguided rockets in popular culture. Broadcast radio interviews of several wartime P-47 pilots appear on the CD audiobook USAF at War 1942-45, including an account by Lieutenant J.K. Dowling of ground support operations around Cherbourg in June 1944. And a group of 4 pilots from the 362nd Fighter Wing, 9th Air Force, in conversation at their mess in Rouvers, France on the 24th of December 1944 during the Battle of the Bulge. 70 Laughter and Tears 71 by Captain George Rary, a posthumous publication of letters and sketches from a pilot in the 379th Air Group flying P-47s based in England, the Czech composer Bohuslav Martin. While in residence in the US, wrote an orchestral scherzo in 1945 entitled P-47 Thunderbolt H-309 in tribute to the aircraft and its role in World War II. Other media include Thunderbolt, a 1947 color documentary film directed by John Sturges and William Wyler, featuring James Stewart and Lloyd Bridges and narrated by Robert Lowery. Mont 72, the film Fighter Squadron, 1948, depicts a P-47 Thunderbolt unit and 730 Thunderbolts. The Conquest of the Rake, a 2001 television documentary presented by the History Channel. Director Lawrence Bond depicted the last months of World War II over Germany as told by 4 P-47 pilots of the 362nd Fighter Group using original, all-color 1945 footage. The P-47 Thunderbolt was the subject of an episode of the World's Deadliest Aircraft series broadcast by the Military Channel. Lieutenant Colonel Robert Samuel Johnson collaborated with aviation author Martin Caden to write his autobiographical story of the 56th Fighter Group, Thunderbolt. In 1958, Johnson scored 27 kills in the P-47 while flying with the 56th Fighter Group. In 2015, it was named the State Aircraft of Indiana due to its Evansville roots, 74 feet. It is the namesake of the Evansville Thunderbolts minor league hockey team.